Yeah, today we're going to talk about some coordinate geometry, so stuff happening in the coordinate plane, the XY coordinate plane, and we're going to find the distance between points, and we're going to find midpoints. So we'll start with a quick discussion about Pythagorean Theorem, and that's something that you should at least be a little familiar with. When we have a right triangle, we know this is a right triangle because of this box in the corner. We can call the hypotenuse C. The hypotenuse is always the side across from the right angle, and it's always the longest side. And then we call the other two sides A, and we have this theorem that says that A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And so I'll show you an example here. If we want to figure out how long this hypotenuse is, we can plug these two legs in, 3 and 4, and we would be able to solve for C and figure out how long the hypotenuse is. And so we're going to use that idea to find out how long segments are in the coordinate plane. So here I have a segment. It's called a segment because it's just a part of a line. It's between 2 points. So notice there's no arrows on the end of this line because it doesn't go on and on forever. It starts here and ends here, and that's what's called a segment. So if I want to find how far apart those 2 points are, or how long this segment is, the first thing I can do is draw a right triangle. And so I'm going to create a right triangle. There it is. And so here I have, sort of like on the last screen, a right triangle where I'm looking for the hypotenuse. So I'm going to call that C. And so I want to find out how long that is. And so I'm going to find out the coordinates of each of my points. That's -3, 3, and 2, -5. And so to figure out A and B, I can just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. Another way I could do that is by subtracting the x's. Remember, the x values are the numbers that come first, and subtracting the y value. So -3 minus 2 is -5. That's kind of the same as 5. We won't care about the sign. 3 minus -5 is 8. That would be subtracting the y's. Again, we don't care about the sign. And so I can plug in the Pythagorean theorem. So I get 5 squared plus 8 squared is C squared. And 25 plus 64 is C squared. And 89 is equal to C squared. And we want C, not C squared, so the way to get rid of the squared is to square root both sides. And so we can just say that the length of this segment is the square root of 89. And that's somewhere between 9 and 10. So 9 point something if you put that into your calculator. So let me try another one. Find the length of this segment. Might be easy to see the right triangle here, but I'll go over it. And I'm going to find the coordinates of each of these points. So 0, 4, and 5, 0. So if I subtract the x's, let me subtract 0 and 5. So 0 minus 5 is -5, and we'll just call it +5. Here I want to do 4 minus 0. 4 minus 0 is just 4. So when I do Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to plug 4 in for one of these, and I'll plug 5 in for the other. And here I'll square it. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. Add these together and get 41. And then to get rid of the squared so we can know what C is, we square root both sides. And we could say that C is the square root of 41. And you can leave it that way. In decimal form, it would be something like 6.5, 6.4, somewhere in the neighborhood of a little bit bigger than 6, a little bit smaller than 7. But right now, you can just leave it like that. So I want you to pause here, and I want you to find the length of this segment using Pythagorean theorem. So I can create my right triangle, find the coordinates of my points. They're 1, 3, and -5, -5. So to find this distance down here, I'm going to do -5 minus 1 and get -6. And we can just call it +6. And I'll do -5 minus 3. And I'll get -8. We can call it +8. So I'm just subtracting the x's, subtracting the y's, and now I'm going to plug that into Pythagorean theorem. I'm just going to plug in +6 and +8. I get 36 plus 64, which is 100. When I square root both sides, the square root of 100 is just 10. So I know that this length, or the distance between this point and this point, or the length of this line segment, is 10 units long. The other thing we'd like to find out about segments is where's the midpoint? The point that's exactly in the middle. The point that's exactly in the middle of these 2 points. And so I'm going to start by finding the coordinates, 2, 0, and -4, -3. And I literally want to find the point that's in the middle. So I can figure out what's in the middle of -4 and 2. I can figure out what's in the middle of -3 and 0. Or I can find an average. And we average by adding and dividing by the number of numbers we add. So if I want to find the average of the x's, I do -4 plus 2. So I'm adding the x's. And since I'm adding 2 numbers, I'll divide by 2 to get an average. And so I get -2 over 2, which is -1. I can also add the y's. -3 plus 0, I'll divide by 2. Get -3 over 2. And we can leave it just like that in fraction form. And so that means that our midpoint is located at -1, comma, -3 over 2, or -1, -1.5. So -1, -1.5. That's right there. And that should look like it's right in the middle of these 2 original points. So there's our midpoint. And notice when I find a midpoint, it's the coordinates of a point in this coordinate plane, so it's got an x value and a y value, and I put parentheses around it because that's how we label points. So let's find another one. Coordinates here are 1, 3. Coordinates here are -5, -5 again. So I want to find the point that's in between those two, the midpoint of this segment. So I'm going to add the x's and divide by 2. So -5 plus 1 divided by 2 gives me -4 over 2, which is -2. I'll add the y's. That's -5 plus 3 over 2. which is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So the coordinates of our midpoint are negative 2, negative 1. The number I get from my x's goes first. The number from my y's goes second. Let's graph this. Negative 2, negative 1 is right there. Should look like it's right on the middle of that line segment. So again, pause this video, try this one, and then press play for the answer. So I'm going to find the coordinates of my points. 5, negative 1. Negative 5, negative 2. I'll add the x's. So negative 5 plus 5 divided by 2, that gives me 0 divided by 2, which is just 0. Add the y's. Negative 2 plus negative 1 divided by 2 gives me negative 3 over 2, and we'll leave it just like that. And so my 0 comes first because it's from my x's. My negative 3 over 2 comes second because it's from my y's. And so I plot a point at 0, negative 1.5. 0, negative 1.5. That should look like it's in the middle of those 2 points. So that's all I got for you today. What I'd like you to do, I've added 2 questions. Number 1, I want you to find the length of the segment using Pythagorean Theorem. And number 2, I want you to find the midpoint in the segment by adding the x's, dividing by 2, add the y's, divide by 2, and choose the appropriate answer choice that I give you.